Hello, I'm Mark Tucker,
Hello, I'm Alan Furstenberg, and we are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Welcome back, Alan.
Welcome back, Mark. Always good to have our weekly chat.
Yes.
I always look forward to this.
Same with me. It's always good to take a break from all that you're doing and talk with a friend about things that you are interested in talking about. It's good.
No, I always appreciate our chats. Sometimes they can be, down in the dirt about problems that we have, and sometimes they're more casual and kind of, blue sky. And I ran across this post. It feels like a couple of weeks back now on the Alexa Slack channel, I think, and it actually is kind of in between those. It's kind of blue sky, but it has some, what's the technology that we could use for this? And I thought it would be fun to kind of brainstorm how we would tackle this problem and show, kind of illustrate to our listeners what that might be like.
Okay.
You up for that? So here, okay.
Yeah.
So here's the challenge. What would an Alexa skill or Google action, how would we create one that needed to do, I guess, social networking or a group chat function might be the best way to put it. And to be clear, this is human to human or human to group of humans, that kind of conversation.
Okay. So it is, so that means it's asynchronous by nature. It means that I could post something or say something that then gets posted someplace that somebody can pick up almost immediately afterwards or days later and can comment on and back and forth like that, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
We could think of it if if you were in a group Facebook messaging room, or if you had DMs that you were exchanging on Twitter.
Okay.
Or maybe, a topic group. I guess we can kind of constrain it like that. So we can, let's assume, just for the sake of the conversation. Well, I was going to say, let's assume for the sake of conversation that you're going to be interacting with people that you know. But maybe we don't have to. So we can,
okay.
That's a more broad parameter.
All right, we'll kind of keep that in mind. So the idea is that how in a conversational way can we say things that will get turned into messages and that we'll be able to ask commands where we could hear messages from others. So we're still using the mouth and the ear as far as, the senses that we're using, but we're talking through a voice assistant on a smart speaker, smart display.
Yep.
Phone or something like that, but we're talking.
Yep. No, and
okay.
I think that's an excellent point, that we're looking at a voice first, and in some cases possibly a voice only solution for this. So,
and we're not going old school where it's voice only, meaning I call you and talk to you on the phone.
Party line.
Yeah.
I understand that technology is out there.
Yeah,
but I think that's a little too radical for some people. So let's take what we used to call the plain old telephone system out of the equation.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. It's got some interesting challenges in the fact that it's got to be asynchronous and that you could be talking to one or more people potentially, and that there could be a distance of time, and there could be a great volume of messages, I'm assuming. So you could go ahead.
I was going to say, let's also kind of assume one other thing, and that's that we're actually going to have conversation designers who will plan out much of that part of the design.
Okay.
So I don't think you and I need to focus too much. I think we're going to need to talk about somewhat what that conversation flow is going to look like.
Yeah.
But I don't think we need to get bogged down in that detail.
Okay.
We've got plenty of technical details that we need to figure out on this anyway.
Yeah, you're right. And but we have to know enough to kind of like play it out, kind of talk through it a little bit so we understand kind of what some of the use cases are broadly. But it's definitely going to be rough, kind of a rough stone on the conversation design, waiting for somebody to come through and polish it up for us.
Yep.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that's challenging. So let's start with the first part, which like I have something I want to say. So I would need to invoke the assistant and be able to maybe pinpoint a specific group or something, because I might be wanting to talk about voice stuff, or I might be wanting to talk about JavaScript, or I might be wanting to talk about the local sports team. There's lots of different topics that maybe I care about and want to be having conversations with others about. So I would say probably invoke and give a topic, and then be able to leave a message, right? And that would be, we'd want it to be a word message based on exactly what I say.
Well, and here we run into our first problem.
It is.
And already. That's what we really want to do, is we want to record a message that plays back on our own voice, right?
Oh, that would be, yeah, because otherwise then, it's kind of, you're losing something if it's just the fact that it's the text to speech or like the transcription of what I said, then spoken out on the other end in some, TTS voice. Then do I choose Matthew? Do I choose?
We'll deal with that
Joey?
In a second.
Do I choose? Yeah.
Right. So our first challenge is what we really want is to be able to record a message and have that message be played back. But neither platform has a way to record a message.
That's true. So you'd have to look at potentially creating your own custom.
Right. Well, we either talk about going to another assistant, or we talk about, sending you to a website where you record it and then you link back into your skill. And
kind of the easiest solution to that is if it's a mobile application.
True.
Because then the mobile application can record what you say. But what's kind of interesting is that you wanting to, I guess you could have a conversation like leave a message for XYZ group. And then it would say, start recording in 3, 2, 1. And then you start recording, and that part is the audio that gets recorded. And then that audio file is actually sent up, which is kind of interesting, because then it bypasses any ASR or NLU. It's just, this is the recording that needs to be, that's part of the data that needs to go to whatever topic it was, whatever API call is going to accept that.
And the good news is that both platforms have technology that's not quite here yet, but it's coming to do that sort of thing, to invoke your app,
your mobile application
via voice.
Okay, on the device. Okay, all right. So,
but the catch is neither of them will support that on things like smart speakers and smart displays.
Yeah, so we've got like a send a phone feature, but yeah, so you'd have to like get to the mobile app, and then it would be the mobile app itself that would need to record the audio of what you said. That's part of your message. So is your message. So
let's file that one away as a possibility.
Okay.
But let's also look at what a smart speaker only solution would look like, and go on the assumption that it means that we're not going to have our recorded voice, we're going to have a transcript.
Okay. Yeah, because I was going to say, we've got a whole bunch of different options. If we're going to already have to go Alexa and Google to send us to a mobile app, then you could use Nuance or Houndify, or there's all kinds of things that you could use instead to do that on a so that would be, your mobile phone would be then voice controlled, and that's kind of a different experience. Okay, so we're going to file that away. We're going to focus on, you would have an easier time on Google, because then you would get the full transcript of what the person said.
Well, that's true. That's true.
On the Alexa side, I would have to do something with some sort of an anchor phrase, and then using a search query slot type, which would then just pick up the rest of what you said, kind of
Mhm.
as free form, but that's not always great. And the fact that it requires you to have an anchor phrase and say something exactly.
Well, let me ask you this. What if as part, what if this is a one-shot invocation like thing? So I could say, tell social app to send a message to my group saying, and then the rest of the text.
Okay, yeah. So that would be a valid anchor phrase. The ask group saying that whole pattern, that anchor phrase there, and then the rest of it. Yeah, that would be. I think that would be okay.
And that's certainly something we can do on the Google side as well. Is
Yeah.
we have a global intent that has those two slots, one of which is a free form slot.
Right.
Um,
So
I
okay.
think that the challenge on the Google side would be that what I'd love that first slot to be are just the groups that you're a member of. So it has a custom slot type,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't do that as part of an invocation phrase.
Yeah, we kind of the same issue on our side, on the Alexa side, with if you wanted to have dynamic entities and say these are the list of the groups that are valid groups,
Yeah.
you want to minimize it to just these three, you need at least one round trip to return back the list of dynamic entities to then invoke it. So a one shot really wouldn't work. It would be
A one shot wouldn't be perfect. Let's
yeah.
go. Yeah.
So, but if you did a launch and then you had the command where it was the anchor phrase, including topic and the word saying followed by the what you were going to say, that would work. But they would have to always say the anchor phrase. There is a kind of a way around that, and that's if you do some of the dialogue management stuff that is specific to Alexa. There's a way that you can do your conversations in kind of a generic way, and so it works on both Alexa and Google if you're using something like Jovo. But then there is a way to not have the anchor phrase, so you could say like send a message to the
My
certain
group.
topic, and then the response would be like, what do you want to say? And then you would just start saying what you want to say. You can do search the search query slot type with no anchors at all, as long as it's part of this dialogue management
Oh, cool. Okay.
stuff. It's extra work and it's a little bit of a pain, but you can do it. In fact, I had done a project where we were actually sending texts via voice. So
That's literally what we're talking about here.
yeah.
So okay. So that's a valid approach on the Alexa side, and certainly that's a valid approach on the Google side.
Okay.
So okay, so I think we've got a couple of paths for sending out for sending the message.
Yep.
And I think we've got a bunch of ways that we'll be able to fill those slots.
Yeah.
Anything else we need to think about when sending?
So on the input, not really. So then it comes down to what are we going to do? Is this like something that we're building from scratch? So we need to build the infrastructure where a message goes to a group, and do we need to do that? Or like, do we have an API like we're posting something on Twitter and Twitter's going to worry about sending things off, or are we posting it to Slack or whatever, any API for something that's existing?
We're building an MVP here, so let's go build our own
Okay.
chat platform.
I'll tell you one way to do it, even though I think I like the way you're going to recommend better. I have an idea of what you're going to say. But one thing I've done in that case, since I use Node, one of the ways to do like a pub sub messaging infrastructure is something called pub nub. And you create a client or a sender, and it registers for a specific topic or specific string, and then anybody who wants to listen to it would register. So you could have, the person that's sending this off be using the voice assistant through a skill or action, and people could be on a website just getting the updates as it's going through. So one of the advantages of having like a pub sub architecture is that it decouples the senders from the receivers, and you could have a sender be in lots of different modalities. In this case, we're talking about, is it through voice assistant? Is it through a mobile app? Is it through a website? Is it through text? Is it through, and on the other end, you could have the same type of thing, as long as there's something that could register that would be able to listen and get updates as it's coming in, then it could update. So that's one idea.
Now let me ask one thing about PubNub first, is does it give the ability to do that asynchronously? So that I could be publishing stuff, and then an hour later you could come in and say, okay, what's been published on this topic?
You know what? I haven't investigated that, because what I was looking at was actually like, I want something to be near real time, chatting. So I don't know if it's possible, and I don't know if it's been modified in the 2 years since I've last looked at it. So not sure. It might be that one of the listeners or receivers is something that posts it to a thread, or whatever behind the scenes Twitter does to store this information for persistence. So it's not just around when you're connected to it, right? So maybe, I'm not sure. There might
Let's assume so.
There might be better ways to do that.
Okay. Well, and I think what you probably guessed I would say is using something like Firebase or Firestore.
That is
probably
exactly
Firebase.
what I was thinking.
Right. And the big reason there is because it is a database. So it does let you just dump stuff in and then later query for, what's been available since this period, since this time.
Right.
But it also allows for real-time connections. So that if I was on a website, if I did have a web app version of this as well, it would handle pretty much behind the scenes me saying, okay, I'm now asking, I have a query for stuff in this topic. And then as new stuff gets added to that topic, I will immediately get an event notification that that new content is available, and here's the content.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I thought for sure. I said that seems like a really good use case for Firebase.
Right, and it's such a good use case that it's like the example that they've been giving for Firebase for like 5 years. They like using chat clients as their example because it works really well with their model. The catch, though, is that for the asynchronous operation of skills and actions, we can't use that.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because which is why we needed some way to be able to query for what's taken place since we were last there.
So we would need some sort of, we're imagining at some point in time, we're like, hey, I wonder what's been going on today with, my JavaScript friends. I don't know.
Well, so there are a couple of approaches here. Let's go with that. Let's go with the on-demand, the request.
Okay. So I can imagine I'm invoking the voice app and I'm saying, what's new with JavaScript? Or today, maybe. Right. Maybe I give it something that would define a range, a date range.
Or even when you just started the app, it would say, hey, haven't seen you in a couple of hours. Since then, your JavaScript group has had 5 messages. And your personal rant group has had 27 messages. What would you like to do? And you could say, oh, I don't care about any of them. I want to send a message.
Yeah. Or you say, listen to, tell me about JavaScript.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So any of those ways are certainly valid ways to get into a group.
So that would be, remembering that a voice conversation is a request response, and you've got 7 seconds for that round trip to happen. So even if it's like an asynchronous call, we're still going to have to await the response to come back for a list of things. So some API is going to need to be called, a list of things are going to come back, and then we're going to have to figure out how we want to iterate through them. Do we just start reading? The first message is this, blah, 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 blah. The second message is this, blah, 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 blah. Or do we do it one at a time? Say your first message is blah, blah, blah.
What would you like to do?
Because maybe you want to take some sort of an action. Maybe you want to respond to it. Maybe you want to just go on to the next one. Maybe you want to delete it. I don't know, whatever.
Right. And some of that's going to depend on, some of that'll depend on exactly what the interface is like. But, thinking about, I don't know, when was the last time you actually called your voicemail to listen to it and to try to deal with it? And that can get really frustrating.
Yeah, 7 to delete.
Right. So, you've got that kind of possible pattern. On the other hand, just having it streaming off the replies may not be the best one either.
Yeah, depending on how, if it's something like Twitter where you're constrained to like 120 characters or 240 characters now. Sorry, I'm old school.
Going old school here.
Going old school Twitter, yeah. Sorry about that. But yeah, if you've got some sort of constraint, then it might make sense to do one or like batch them up. And this is where it'd be interesting is if you actually had the real audio file, right? That you could listen to. That would be really fun because then you could hear it in,
But so here's another thought that I had on that front. Assuming we don't have an audio file though, I could easily imagine that either you or the system might pick different voices for different people.
Yeah, as like a configuration option, you can say if it comes from so-and-so.
Right. If it's coming from Mark, then use, this particular voice on Alexa and this, this voice on Google. And this is where getting into technical, this is where speech markdown would absolutely shine right now.
Yep.
Because that's a fantastic feature that's built into it, that you can configure what those voices are by name.
No, this is interesting. This is a fast forward to the future. We're still talking about text to speech, but what if in some future world, part of my profile when I set my profile up in this system, I have
my custom voice.
I've customized. I've gone through and done a custom voice, and so now there is some API in the end that could take text and then respond back in my voice. So now that's still text, but because the message is coming from me, then I've chosen what the provider is for that text to speech. And so then the audio that gets generated is how I want to be represented.
Yep. And even if it's not a perfect representation of how you said it, it should, at least in a lot of cases, have a distinguishing, and it should sound enough like you that when I hear it, I don't have to think, who is that?
What if I wanted to sound like Alvin on the Chipmunks, right? What if I wanted to have that? I guess you would get, after the first one, you would note and
associate, Mark has this funny voice, but
Mark, it sounds like Alvin the Chipmunk, and I don't want to talk with him anymore. let me apply the override for those annoying BTS voices that somebody else selected.
And I think this starts, going back to things like, the custom fonts that we have in CSS now, in the same way, having the same idea of a custom voice and styling it.
And a voice fallback. And
would be a really, and a voice override if I don't like your
Alvin.
No, I think that would all work out really well.
That's an interesting thing that you can't do in any of the systems that we have today. Would be customizing what the voice that's going to read the response or the message in.
Right. I mean, we as a user don't have that ability.
Yeah.
We as developers do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's certainly something that we could give. That I think might have to be another subject for another time. So I think that's a lot of powerful abilities that we have. I think one of the interesting challenges is going to be that and some of this is going to depend on what the designer comes up with. Is it going to pause after each message, or after every few messages, and prompt you? And kind of the answer is, at some point it's going to have to prompt you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think right now, knowing that there could be multiple actions that I take after each message, I could archive it, I could favorite it, I could reply to it, I could
Delete it, yeah.
forward it, then I'm inclined that after each message, then give them a prompt where they can say next to go on to the next one, cancel to just stop the going through. You got 50 messages and you've made it through 3 of them, and you're like, okay, that's enough. I'm enough talking about this topic. But you'd want to be able to mark those as well. So you'd want something to happen. Like there's probably going to be some sort of an API call that happens after each one, even if you're just doing next, to mark it as read and like what the last read date was. So like, then if you leave and then you go right back in, then maybe instead of 10 messages on a certain topic, now you've got 7 unread, unheard, whatever messages.
And here I think it might be a place where Google might be able to do things a little bit easier. Because on the Alexa, the obvious thing is that you want to attach that data to the user. And on the Google side, that's just the user object that the assistant maintains for you. Whereas on the Alexa side, that's a database call to save it in a user database, correct?
Yeah.
And it's not that that's a bad thing, because that is a good thing. But it does mean that it's an additional API call, as opposed to making it just part of the transaction that the response that you're already doing.
Yeah.
So, pros and cons on that one.
Yep.
One of the interesting things that I was also thinking about is, certainly for some groups, I may not necessarily want it all that asynchronous. I might just want to hang out in a chat room and hear messages as they get posted. And if I wanted to reply to it.
Okay.
And that I think is a place that is trickier to do on the Alexa side.
Yeah, I'm wondering how you did it on your side too, because even if let's say that we have a smart display and you've got APL showing, like after 30 seconds, it's going to go away. It's not constantly listening. There's the way to get back into a skill and listen to something is through a notification. So you could send a notification that something's happening, but depending on how active that is, then you would have to, hear, you might get a whole bunch of those, and then you'd have to specify, oh, I'm going to go back into the skill, and then you can, it could go right into here's what we're talking about, if that's the configuration that you have or something. But there's not really a way to keep the skill open and just listen.
Right. It's hard on the Alexa side. On the Google side, it's a little bit of a trick. I'll be honest.
All right.
And that's that I would essentially play hold music. So
walk through how that might work.
So using the media, one of the neat things about the media player is that it's unlike Alexa, where it takes you out of the conversation. Media player on the Google side leaves you in the conversation. What you could do something like is, in the response that you send back, specify play this text to speech, and then play this audio for 10 seconds. Okay. So it would read out the next response, play the 10 seconds worth of audio, which could be silence, but doesn't have to be. Then when the audio is finished, that triggers an event to go back to the action, calling your webhook again. It would then check to see, okay, do we have any new messages? If so, send those back and then play hold music again. And if you're really slick, you could do things like, well, if the chat seems like it's very active, make it a very short hold music, like a second.
Mhm.
And if it's pretty quiet, or start at 10 seconds, and if it's still quiet, maybe up it to 20 seconds or 30 seconds, and then go back down again when the conversation picks up.
Okay, that's
So
interesting.
it's cheating. And I know it's cheating. It's not how the media player was meant to be used.
Yeah. So we could probably, if you had a smart display with APL, you could probably do something. It gets confusing because APL is running on the client, and you could play a video. You could have like a 1 pixel by 1 pixel video that is for 10 seconds or something, and then you could iterate it. And so that's a way, like if you wanted to have a dashboard and keep something inside your skill's always active. You might have to do something to the back end to keep it alive.
Well, I think that's the question is, when the video finishes, is there a way to say, trigger something that gets me back to the server? Trigger
Yeah,
a user event.
there are events that get triggered at different points during that. So you could then send a command to the server. So do a send event, and that would go back to the skill. And then you could, in the response that came back from that, you could do a command back to the device. I'd have to explain that. That does get
starts
tricky.
the APL again.
Yeah. And you can make it so it goes back to the same screen that it's on. So that's interesting. Thinking a little bit differently, if it's just audio, there might be something that we can do on the back end, because what you can do if you have an audio skill, so this would work on a smart speaker and work on a smart display, but you start the audio player with some audio.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that gets done, it could query for the next thing.
Now, as I understand the audio player, though,
Mm-hmm.
all that it can ever return is audio.
Yes. So you'd have to do something on the back end where you would.
So your back end would have to do the text to speech.
Well, yeah, the back end would have to do the text to speech and then populate an audio file that then it would query. And I guess if it got to the point where it didn't have anything, then it could insert like a hold music, and then when that was done, it would query again, and so there
So that part would be the same.
something you can do. That starts getting into kind of like having like a custom music skill or something, which would have like a catalog, so I don't know.
I think, and that's very similar. Mm-hmm. I think the big difference there is that on the Google side, I could hear somebody saying something, and during that hold music period, I could say, reply to that, or play that again, or I could issue commands.
Okay.
Whereas on the Alexa side, I'm out of the conversation.
Yeah,
the only thing I can do is repeat next track.
Yeah, you could do Alexa stop, and then that would like end the audio player. Then you'd go back into the skill. Welcome back to the skill. So it's very challenging interface to work.
Actually, that's an interesting. Could you just reinvoke a new skill? Reinvoke the skill?
I don't know.
So it's a possibility.
Yeah, it would be something to play with, but it's not. It's definitely not made to do that. And it would be,
to be honest,
challenging. Yeah.
To be honest, the media player on the Google side isn't quite made to do that either. But it does. So we've got a couple of ways to send messages and to store and ship messages around and to hear them. Have we kind of solved the problem?
That sounds like a minimum viable product or minimal lovable product or whatever people are calling them these days. Yeah, that sounds like a version 1, something that you could get out to your community and try it out and innovate.
And certainly there would be other commands, like we've got the discovery question, how do we find the communities that we want? How do we invite other people? Oh, that's another one, that if we wanted to do things asynchronously, sometimes there might be groups that are really interesting to us that we'd want to get notifications for.
True.
So how would we handle that? Assuming there was some way to flag which ones we did want notifications for, how would that notification part happen?
So how would you code the notification piece?
Yeah.
So let's see, I'm dusting off what I remember from notifications. So there's actually an API call that you can make that would send a notification. So that could be from some system someplace else. So you get the information, and like the key and stuff that says this notification is going to be for this specific skill, and then you can post something to that, and then that would send a notification out, which gives you the bar or the ring on your device saying that you've got a notification, and you can say, hey, what's my notifications? But there are certain, let's call them schema, for lack of a better term, of certain things that you can say. So they've got some like phrases that have some placeholders, and you can fill in the placeholders. One of them, luckily, is like you've got 3 unread messages or something like that. You can do something like that.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's not free form. You have to fit it to one of the schemas. They're not giving you the ability to do anything. You have to.
And when you acknowledge the notification, does it launch you into the skill?
Yep.
Okay. So that's a reasonable approach. On the Google side, you're much more limited. The notifications can only go to the phone. I'm not even sure the notifications are fully supported anymore. It's been a long time since I played with that. But they only go to the phone. They don't go to any of the other smart devices. And you'll get a regular phone notification there, which will take you into the action on your phone.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. So there's our alerts as well. And we're assuming there's going to be, ways to discover groups and ways to invite friends to groups. And I don't think we need to.
Yeah, that gets hard though, because like, how do you then identify people? Because that Mark can be spelled is a very simple name, 4 letters, and it can be spelled with a C or a K.
Yeah, but here's a way, that if I wanted to invite you to my group, I could, discovery usually takes place out of band.
Okay.
So I could send you a text message with a quick link or an action link.
You sure could. And then I click on that, and that would link me up with you.
Right. It would go right into this group that I've just invited you to.
Yep.
And take you right into the skill or action.
That's true.
So that's a great use of quick links and action links.
Yep. So it'd have to be a custom task quick link, because remember, there's 2 different types of quick links.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And Alexa, there's the one that just opens up the skill. And there's really nothing you have to do code-wise. You just have to craft a quick link URL that includes the skill ID and the proper .com if it's in the US. So the proper URL, and you're good to go. It launches it. But like a custom task link where you want to pass in parameters, then you on your code side have to register with the skill, this custom task and the parameters, and then you have to have a handler on your side that would handle that.
Yep. And on the Google side, it means creating a new global intent, and accepting that as a parameter for the invocation. So it's just another invocation intent using a global intent.
Yeah.
And then obviously on the technical side, we'd want to do things like validate this to make sure that it's not somebody, spoofing, that, we've encoded it in some way and we're validating it so we don't have people just randomly joining our groups. But that's just common sense data handling.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, there would be some things that we could do to make sure the thing that's getting passed maybe was signed, so that then you could see if it's been tampered with, and all kinds of fun stuff.
Yep. So any other features that we want to make sure we get in our MVP?
No, not that I can think of.
Yeah, that's about all I can think of as well. So I'm curious if other people have other ideas, both of what they would see, would want in that first release.
Yeah,
Because, and then more interestingly, how in the world would we do it with voice?
yeah. I do have a question. It's one of those things, just because we could do it, does it really make sense to do it?
That's a really good point.
Yeah, so I guess people that are out there listening, just what do
And
you think? Is this a good voice experience? Are there benefits to it? Why would it be? Why would you want to use that?
yeah, you know what? I have thoughts on that, but maybe I'll hold that for another episode
Okay.
or a conversation elsewhere. And you can find us on Twitter or LinkedIn if you want to continue this conversation, particularly to your question, Mark, about we thought so hard about can we do it, should we do it? So I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
Um, and if we get a lot of really good conversation going, I think we'll pick this up another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two voice steps. Take care, Alan.
Take care, Mark. Have a great week.
You too. See you, everybody.